Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about why George Washington was a really good president. So, for those of you who don't know, George Washington was the first U.S. president. He was born February 22nd, 1732. He was inaugurated on April 30th, 1789. Before George Washington became president, he commanded the Continental Army. He was a military general. So now that I've given you a brief description of his early life before he became president, now let's start talking about what made him such a good president. Like most of the presidents, he had many flaws. For example, he was a slave owner, and like many of the people and presidents after him, he was also racist. But we can't let that just cover up all the good things he did. So in the video, we're going to talk about many of the events that went against George Washington and how he handled them in a good way that helped the United States, unlike some of the other presidents. Alright, so there were multiple events that George Washington handled in a really good way. But we're going to pick out just one, and that's going to be the Janet Affair. So, the Janet Affair was this, conflict or argument between France and Britain. So, George Washington had the chance or choice to join that dispute or whatever you want to call it, but he decided to stay in peace with both places. Not only was this a safe move for the United States because it prevented any of his people from dying unnecessarily, but it also protected the economy so that none of the two places would hate him, so they could still trade with each other. Because if you were to just join one side, the other place, the place they would be fighting against, the enemy of the person he joined would stop trading with them, stop having contact with the United States, which would be bad for the United States economy. So in the end, the choice he made was probably the best one. Okay, on to the next reason why George Washington was a good president. So many people have heard of the Whiskey Rebellion. The Whiskey Rebellion was an uprising in 1794 where farmers and distillers in western Pennsylvania protested about the tax. They didn't like it. They thought it was way too expensive, and they were protesting at one of the tax collectors' houses. The house ended up getting burned. It was actually being guarded by multiple guards, which ended in a small little battle. And so in response to that, George Washington had to make the decision to send troops down to Whiskey. This would be the first actual military response within the U.S. boundaries. And it was led by George Washington. If we compare George Washington to the three other selected presidents, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and James Madison, we can see how much better he was. So if we take a look at Thomas Jefferson, we can see that during his presidency, he wasn't the worst president, but he did make some choices that weren't the best for the United States. Many of his choices didn't harm any people directly, but they did waste a lot of money and resources. For example, the Louisiana Purchase barely brought any benefits to the United States. There wasn't much area to settle because a lot of it was already being used by natives. Overall, Thomas Jefferson wasn't the ideal president, but the two remaining presidents were not any better. Their decisions did harm people directly. So, if we were to look at Thomas Jefferson, he made many mistakes, but none were as bad as the next presidents I would talk about. So ranked third place out of the four presidents is going to be John Adams. There are multiple reasons why John Adams wasn't fit to be a president, but there's two big ones that made him such a bad one and that made so many people upset with him. And those were his two acts, the Sedition Act and the Alien Act. So both of these acts not only damaged the government, but it also hurt many of the people. So what the Sedition Act is it made it so that no one could criticize the government in any way. And the Alien Act made it so that anyone could be deported or arrested if he felt that it was needed. No, they didn't have a choice. They would immediately be deported or arrested if the president thought it was necessary. These policies just weren't they breached the people's human rights, and they also were just terrible for the U.S. Everyone was upset with them, especially because this was hurting many families and stuff. At the very bottom of the list, in 4th place, it's going to be James Madison. The loss of this war caused many deaths. It was the War of 1812. The war created much more problems and conflict than it did improvements or benefits to the U.S. Although James made some good choices during his presidency, he wasn't able to recover from one of his biggest mistakes, which was this war. The war caused so many people to unnecessarily lose their lives and barely helped the Americans with their economy, or they didn't earn anything from this war. This shows how he wasn't fit to be a leader. Both John Adams and James Madison both were equally bad presidents because they both made decisions that unnecessarily endangered the lives of their citizens. These actions that I've shown so far have just really proven to show how good of a president George Washington was, how good his choices were, and unlike other presidents, how almost all of his choices were made and kept in mind the thought of making sure that the United States stayed safe and peaceful. Alright, so I'm going to end the video here. If you guys did enjoy or got any information from this video, you're welcome. But other than that, thank you for watching and have a great rest of your day.